on the agenda to hit the 4 p.m. deadline. We'll do our best, but there's a few people that need to go at 4 or thereabouts to catch flights. That's just the way it is. So it's going to run over time, is what I'm saying. So we'll do some really quick introductions, but just some housekeeping. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the country in which we're meeting today, the Camberwell people. Acknowledge elders past, present, and emerging. Housekeeping, exits everywhere. You get an emergency, run to your left. Blues are out there. You just go out that door along the corridor, and you'll see a brick block. The blues are in there. We booked dinner from 6 at a Thai restaurant just up the road. So any of you who want to come to dinner, let me know. We've got booking for 15, but it's probably optimistic. We'll be recording the session because there's a couple of folks that can't make it today. A couple of the landholders that definitely want to see this. So has anybody got a problem with the event being recorded? We're good to go. Okay. We are recording that. We're going to record it in blocks too, because the file gets too big to handle, but Holly will take care of that. All right, so if we could do some really quick introductions, who you are and where you fit into the scan, we'll whiz around the table. So Rick Humphreys, I sit on the pilot group for the project. I have a small horticultural operation down the road in the Granite Belt, and I'm hoping to be involved in this phase 2.
Andrew Ward or Wardy from Redneck Partners Mutual.
Unmute.
Tanya Pritchard from WWF.
John Clark from Redneck Partners Mutual.
Not to.
Devin Kaplan and everyone investment.
Perry, I'm the chair of the Central Committee representing, but more importantly, all the help medically those.
Can I just ask, can people online hear this? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
So we can't because we are black.
It's marginal. It sounds garbled. The further away you are from wherever the microphone is, the more garbled it is.
All right, well, my apologies. We're going to whiz through this. You've got a list of folks on your agenda, so that's the best way to 2 hour run, and then we'll see what we can do going forward. Sorry.
You can hear Rick when he's good. Hear me?
We'll just have to move this people, give people the Andy?
Yeah, Andrew Ferrier, just local landowner, part of the
You
whole.
can hear, no?
John Bosch,
Can't.
part of the pilot program.
Pete Morris, just part of the whole project as well.
And president of the Trap Rock Association, which is a valued partner in all this shit.
Yes. Yeah, Bruce Longsley, we just half an hour west of here, another one, I know the street. The biodiversity thing. And yeah, I'll do a little bit of bull breaking and various other things as well. Greg Ford, Balance Environmental. I'm looking at biodiversity, foxglove grass and woodland side of the pilot program.
Helen Koska, I'm from Carbonate. I'm also a farmer.
Hey.
Kim Wilson.
Hello.
Carbonate, and the
Come first.
working with all the farmers.
They could hear us.
Michelle Campus, I live about 10 minutes south of Stanford, with Granite Belt Sustainable Action Network.
Built our website and is doing comms as part of the pilot team, which is great.
Nicole Gray, I'm here with the Land Restoration Fund.
G'day, Tom Webster, also with the Land Restoration Fund.
Hello, I'm Holly and I am with the local regional natural resource management group. Southern Queensland.
So, look, just to say briefly, the purpose of this exercise is to get us to the next stage in the project. So we've got 8 landholders.
Did you want to just introduce the folk online?
Yeah, onliners. Thanks.
Sorry. Come on.
Hi everyone, Carmel Onions from the CBA Agri team focusing on
I
sustainability.
can communicate.
Sorry, Michael Petter, SQ Landscapes. I do knowledge and information support and carry things since.
Rodney, Valerie,
My hands around.
Rodney, can you hear us? Valerie? Rodney, do you want to introduce yourselves? Can you hear us?
I don't think they can.
Okay, well, Rodney, can you hear us now? Valerie? Okay, so Rodney and Valerie are also participating landholders in the pilot, so. Okay, so as I was saying, this is to get us to the next stage. I won't go into great detail of where we've gotten to, other than the initial mapping of all the properties for their natural capital values has been completed. And also looking at people, the extent of people's carbon liabilities, whether they've got excess or whether they come up carbon neutral. So we've got the basics in place. We've got the pilot team operating with the 8 landholders. We've got funding from the LRF to facilitate this process that we're hoping that will finish around February next year. So today's session is really twofold. It's for the participating landholders, it's to give them an insight into what's coming down the path or the channel next, particularly around monitoring, evaluation and reporting, and around those physical things that need to be invested in to deliver the natural capital gains and assets. But equally importantly, it's the first time that we're interacting with people that are playing in the market space, like WWF and Elders, who are running a wee bit late. So that's supply chain, finance, and the philanthropic sector. So the idea is to get people up to speed on where we're at and where we're going, and also give those folks from that sector an idea of the systems we're creating, and to get feedback from CBA, woofers and elders as to whether what we're doing is sort of aligned with their expectations, and start to learn from one another. And we hope that those organisations will stick with us, because we're a pilot and this is an evolving space and there's lots of unknowns, and we need trusted and we need trusted partners in this space that will help us inform this process. We can come up with something that's got benefit from everybody to the landholder right up the chain. So that's the purpose of the day, to get us to the next step. I don't think there's anything else I need to add. So I think we might kick off with Brett. Brett, do you want to give yourself just a brief introduction about who you are? We've just been around the table, we've just introduced the so you can just put in the room in 15 words or less. How do you fit into the scheme of things?
I work for Elders, got asked by the board to come along, talk about the full side, you know, it fits into the future of carbon and biodiversity.
So supply chain is your thing?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, so we're just about to get into the presentations from yourselves as the representatives of that part of the equation. So Tanya, do you want to lead on?
You have mine there.
I do.
So this is a microphone too, eh?
Yeah.
So well, if you can stand either there or here, then maybe that works.
In the hug of the.
Hang on one second. Is this yours?
Yeah.
Hang on one second. have a quick thing, if you can just want to think it might be a bit more leave it, but you have a breathing. Very good. So yeah, I'm Tanya Pritchard, I work for WWF. I work as part of our landscape protection and restoration team, specifically focused on our Wildlife Forever program. For those of you that may not be aware, there used to be over 8 million koalas across Australia. There is now less than 100,000. So that's part of the reason why we are supporting a whole range of projects, of which the Koala Carbon Project is one of them. And it's about trying to create sustainable finance for us to be able to restore habitats at scale. This project has come about for that reason, and we partnered with a carbon services provider called Climate Friendly, who are doing all the carbon registration parts of the project. And the project is, we've run a pilot over the last 12 months, focused in the Northern Rivers. It's one of our key investment landscapes in terms of getting turning the trajectory around for koalas. And we're basically seeking to use carbon finance to allow us to scale up the work. We've got I'll talk a bit further about the method we're using to verify those outcomes. And the idea is that a portion of the ACCUs or carbon credits generated from the project will go back into a revolving fund, and that will go on to support further landholders. So with the first round of pilots, the trees have all been funded by the New South Wales government, with WWF providing the upfront costs for the planting design, getting the trees in the ground, and 3 years of maintenance. So it's about removing that barrier to landholders to actually do that kind of carbon project, because traditionally most landholders, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars to establish those kind of projects. It has not been feasible in the past. There's been a whole range of sort of policy changes under the Emissions Reduction Fund, which have allowed these smaller projects to now be more viable economically for landholders to engage in. So we have a 25 hectare minimum, depending on the carbon sequestration potential of the property. So those kind of carbon project sizes have not, traditionally dealt forward. We are working a lot, as much as possible, with Indigenous-led contractors and First Nations Indigenous ranger groups to help us get the trees in the ground, help us do seed collection, help us to grow trees. We're really wanting to build high-integrity projects from all angles, whether it be social, economic, environmental, cultural. And we are also looking at, there's also a new method under the Emissions Reduction Fund, which is about converting failed plantations to permanent forests. So if you've got a plantation, there's a potential for you to earn an income from turning that into a permanent forest through management and that sort of thing. So we've got our first 2 pilots in that method underway to see whether we can make that work from an economic perspective for landholders. As I said, so one of the most important things, if we're going to support landholders to do this, we want them to be a success. So with floods and fires and drought and all those sort of things, the planting design is critical, whether you're doing it in the formation of shelter belts or block plantings or riparian zone plantings, whatever that configuration needs to work with the existing land uses on site, but it also needs to be as resilient as it can be. So there's a range of things that we are doing to try and ensure that the survival of these plantings, including things like using seed provenance from drier zones, various different planting configurations in terms of, you can plant at a fairly loose design and still have a 20% canopy, which is required for these under the Emissions Reduction Fund. So you can still graze once the trees are up and away. You're still able to graze that land, which to a lot of landholders is actually really important. So some of the landholders that we're working with aren't wanting to graze, and so, you know, particularly if they're doing riparian zoned plantings and things like that, and fencing them off and just keeping those as just forest plantings, but other landholders are doing in combination. It's very much up to the landholder. I don't know if any of you saw the landmine program from a couple of weeks ago, but that kind of gives a bit of a flavour as to the sort of things, sort of plantings that we're doing under the project. Yeah, one of the really important things is obviously the maintenance. At this point in time, we're only providing 3 years of maintenance. You know, different areas require different levels of maintenance depending on rainfall, weeds, a whole range of different factors. You know, we may look at adapting that figure as we learn and grow. And you know, we're hoping that 3 years of maintenance is enough to get it, you know, up and running and well and truly able for a landholder there to take on management of that planting. And obviously by the 3-year mark, the revenue is well and truly kicked in by then. So hopefully, you know, there's if it's needed, if you need revenue to help maintain those planting, it's going to be coming from you can get revenue starting to flow from year 1 basically, but it doesn't sort of basically you get 50% of your carbon revenue in the first 50 years. And you get revenue over a 25-year period. So yeah, there's some of the sort of things I talked about in terms of the design considerations, which are obviously really important. We won't go into so the monitoring. So we've developed a method through what's called Accounting for Nature. I'm not sure how many are familiar with it, but it's basically a kind of a national scheme that's set up so you can have a method that's registered where you're basically getting third-party accreditation for, you know, if we're saying that we're actually supporting koalas, we can have a third party that's actually verifying that we're supporting habitat for koalas. So there's a method that we've developed, which is both looking at koala activity level and the integrity or quality of the habitat. And those two things are measured over time, usually at baseline, 5 years and 10 years. And that's providing, you know, that surety to investors and others that we are actually achieving these outcomes. So a very critical part of the project. We are hoping that we will extend that to other threatened species and ecosystems as we move forward. So it won't just be about koalas, because obviously the sort of habitat that koalas exist in is obviously habitat for a whole range of other species, including koalas, lots of black cockatoos, lots of small mammals. So we're just in the phase of implementing these pilot projects. We're planting a lot of trees. We've got 50,000 in the ground. We're planting another 100,000 over the next couple of months. And then into phase 2, we're hoping to plant 500 hectares in FY23 and scaling that up to 1,000 hectares from FY24. But we're still in the process of kind of setting up all the legal and financial structures around that and making sure that we set up the best structure going forward. Because as I mentioned, a portion of the ACCUs goes back into that fund to keep supporting future landholders. I think I've covered pretty much most of that. Yeah, I think it's probably most of it to have opportunity and for questions, so I won't take up too much time.
Great, thank you. So, questions? Comments?
Tony, that's all built around plantings. It's one of the things we hear today is that in this area, the Hamilton Woods, we get a lot of natural regeneration. Would be really interested to hear what the thoughts are on picking up some of that ability of this area to fund, to be funded by the projects for you guys.
I think I did have a quick look before I came here at the carbon sequestration values of the Trap Rock Country. Some areas are okay, others are not. So it's probably, and I'm not sure whether you've mapped that yet as part of this project, but that's probably a pretty critical thing to have in front of you when you're designing where you want to do stuff, because obviously it's going to affect your revenue return. But in terms of using the human-induced regeneration method, you know, I guess we've focused on the environmental plantings method at this point because it allows us to do smaller scale because you get a higher return from environmental plantings than you do from HIR. So yeah, we've focused on it for that, but there's certainly potential to look at HIA tend to need more scale to make a project viable. But I'm not a carbon expert. Definitely think, you know, some of this country would be better suited to that if you can get the scale it's needed to make it viable.
Rick?
Oh, I just wondered what beyond koalas, what the kind of foreseeable time frame is for incorporating some of the other threatened species. We had quite
I think another 12 months we'll be in a position to look. We just need to get some other accounting for nature methods established for being able to provide that verification.
Yeah.
But we've already got interest from, you know, landholders in other areas, you know, so the landline programs made the phone very busy.
Anybody online got a question? Tanya?
I just had a quick one. Tanya, it's so exciting, that program. The Accounting for Nature, the actual reporting on the habitat restoration, who's the audience for style of reporting as opposed to reporting on the carbon credits being generated?
Who's the audience for reporting? Is that your question?
For reporting on the cost of the koala habitat restoration?
It's whoever the investor is. So, and also the landholder, obviously. So, and also us. You know, there's a whole range of people invested in projects. But yeah, because we're expecting the credits to sell for a premium, it's whoever, I guess, is purchasing those credits is going to be interested. They're the audience, the main audience, I suppose.
So on that,
The Accounting for Nature is about demonstrating verifiable claims according to a rigorous scientific method and third-party auditing. So it's all part of independent validation certification.
That's correct. You're much better than reviewers than me.
Right.
So from a funding perspective, the New South Wales government provided funding, WWF provided funding for the upfront costs. The carbon credits are coming from the way that the project generates returns. Those carbon credits might trade at a premium to the rest of the market because of these koala.
Yeah, and obviously because the brand associated with them has a certain amount of credibility as well. So it's a combination of those factors.
Yeah, and I'm presuming the koala is from New South Wales state government offsets legislation requirements?
No, we're not involved in that.
So there's no actual legislative requirement for the verification like there would be for a biodiversity credit?
No, that's correct.
Okay, but theoretically under a federal biodiversity credit scheme, they would want some sort of independent verification like Accounting for Nature.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, so I guess as we move forward, you would have all possibly heard about the biodiversity credit scheme that the Commonwealth is working on currently. There's obviously a lot of opportunities for projects like ours to engage in that market as it builds and progresses as well. So we're currently making sure that we're, I guess, feeding into the process and the design of that new scheme to ensure that, you know, landholders like yourself, if you do engage with a project like ours, that you are still then eligible to engage in that scheme as well. So, you know, there's none of that kind of, if you've already engaged in one thing that you can't engage in others.
Is the credit shared with you guys?
Yes, correct. Well, it's shared with the fund. So, and it basically the sharing is about trying to pay back a portion of the planting cost because it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars.
So is that necessarily, is there a percentage or how's it work?
Yeah, there is, and WWF don't have an AFSL financial services license, so I can't talk about any of the financial particulars. We might have to refer you to our carbon services provider because they have an AFSL. But yes, there is a percentage, and that gets negotiated.
And just one final one, the landscape focus. So presumably you're not going for the license. You start the whole from the landscape.
At at the moment, we're focused in New South Wales, across the east coast, and further inland, Northern Tablelands and Southern Tablelands, because that's the New South Wales government provided us with the trees. But we have a lot of interest from Southeast Queensland, and we're very open to working in Southeast Queensland. Probably not this year, but after this year. And I did look at the koala mapping and stuff for this area and the carbon, and there are some spots where projects would be eligible to participate. Probably in 12 months away.
Okay, anything else from folks online? Okay, thanks, Dan. Thank you. Carmen,
Are there?
you ready to go?
I'm ready. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Well, thank you so much for, sorry?
Yep, go.
I was just going to say thank you so much for inviting me along today. I'm really excited to be here. Very disappointed I couldn't be there in person to meet everybody. My name's Carmel Onions from CBA's agribusiness team, and I specialise around CBA's commitment to supporting farmers on these kind of sustainability journeys. And by that, I mean when farmers are looking to think about their carbon footprint and or improve their natural capital, invest in their natural capital. So I think I must have been one of the first people to ring Wardy up when the guys went sort of public with their announcement that Regen Farmers Mutual had started up. I could immediately see how incredible the idea was and immediately wanted to be a part of it. So again, very pleased to be here today. Just one more comment before I talk about what I'm specifically here to talk about. So CBA is very committed to working with groups such as yourself who are endeavouring to improve natural capital and address the sort of climate challenges that are facing agriculture. And there's a number of things I could talk to, but what I wanted to specifically cover today was an initiative that we've purposely put together to support groups such as yourselves, and it's called the Agri Green Loan. And quite simply, what it is discounted finance up front for approved projects that improve natural capital or help transition to net carbon zero. So before I go into the details about it, I just wanted to give you kind of a bit of background to how it came about. In finance, everybody's trying to think about, well, how can we support sectors like agriculture with these sort of transition challenges? And there's this category of finance called sustainable finance. It's growing very rapidly, but it's traditionally only been available to institutional sized organisations and large corporate ag. And so we thought about, well, was actually the people with the real responsibility for addressing these challenges for agriculture, people like you. And so how do we make sustainable finance available to farmers, all of them? And interesting listening to Tanya, so the importance of measurement is critical. But what the Agri Green Loan recognises is that measurement is hard, measurement is expensive, and not everybody has it yet. So how can we bring the benefits and opportunities of sustainable finance to farmers while everybody's still building their measurement capability and the cost of measurement is coming down? So the Agri Green doesn't really rely on measurement of outcomes. It looks at activity and verification of activity and intention. So what it does is we have a list of approved eligible purpose, and it's much the stuff that we're going to be talking about today that you guys will all be endeavouring for your properties. We know, just quite simply, if we plant a tree and it's the right sort of tree for that sort of area, native local species, then I know you're going to be sequestering carbon. I know you're going to be attracting biodiversity, potentially koalas. I know you're going to be potentially protecting waterways. I know you're going to be enhancing soil carbon. I know you're going to be helping your soil erosion management. There's a whole host of benefits that I know will come, and I don't need you to measure how much of the finance. So I hope that makes sense. So the way the Agri Green Loan works is if Wardy came up to me and said, hey, Carmelo, I want to do some environmental planting, I would say, beauty, and I'd get a bit of information about, okay, well, how many trees, how much money, what sort of trees, who are you working with, what's the full cost of the project, and we do a normal loan. So it is a normal credit process. You do have to have security to finance the loan, and you do have to be able to repay it. But it is at a significant discount to regular finance if the purpose is eligible. And then once Wardy uses that money solely for that purpose, there's one extra step that we go through, is to come out and have a look at the trees, or Wardy can send me a before and after photo, however we achieve it. But I just need to verify that those trees are being planted, in the receipts for the money expended, and know that those trees are going to remain alive. So it's quite simple, actually. And what I thought I'd do now, before I pause for questions, is just to sort of chat through some of the eligible purpose, just to sort of bring it to life for you. So pretty much anything that Rowan and Wardy are going to be talking about for the work you guys are doing in this pilot is going to be eligible. So anything that generates biodiversity credits, carbon credits, fencing off riparian waterways and protecting dams and protecting waterways in general, planting them out. Any soil sequestration projects would be eligible. Anything that is a cost to switch to regenerative farming practices. So wire and water, for example, to switch into rotational grazing. Anything that is a water saving efficiency, or reducing the chemicals we can use because we're applying them more precisely. Anything that sort of promotes and enhances biodiversity. Of course, installing to renewable energy is eligible. Soil erosion restoration and prevention projects, rehydration projects, slowing the flow, all those kind of things, and so on. There's a very long list, but hopefully that kind of gives you an idea. So I might just pause there and speak to any questions, but I would also just like to add one thing after that, is just we do have some options around carbon projects as well. So CBA is really behind behind farmers trying to get into carbon projects for the environmental benefits and the footprint benefits that it brings. And we have some specific financing and support options for farmers once they do have a registered project. So an example of that is we can quite simply just help you sell your carbon credits if you wanted to sell them on the spot market. Secondly, what we're seeing increasingly is that farmers want to pre-finance that ACCU credit stream over the 25 years. So, for example, maybe over the first 5 years, a portion of the ACCUs that you're going to earn, we could give you as a lump sum up front. It does lock the price in over those 5 years, and we wouldn't do it for 100% of the ACCUs because you just don't want to miss out on any upside. But that's an example of the sort of solutions that we have and are being developed by the CBA to support this new emerging market and so on. But I will stop there. Let's have a discussion, and love to take any questions.
We've got a question from Carmen.
I'd also love any feedback if you think it's a good thing or too complicated. Any feedback, welcome.
So, Carmen, if I could just ask one. So you've got some financial products that will allow people to benefit from their credit schemes. There's loans for establishing fencing and whatever is required for the works. But in terms of the CBA being in the market to actually purchase ACCUs and biodiversity credit for your corporate requirements, is that part of the mix as well?
Yes, absolutely. So less so our corporate requirements and more so we have, CBA has one of the largest carbon trading desks in the world actually. And so we have an enormous amount of companies. So any company that says we're going to be net zero by 2050, that's a legal requirement on them. And so if they can't reduce their emissions, they need to buy carbon credits to offset their emissions. So there's enormous demand that we have by our institutional clients who want to buy carbon credits. So we are a big market for them if you need to sell them.
Carmel, existing loan holders that meet the requirements as opposed to new landholders, could they get a refinement on their current interest rate?
The agri-green loan, like many things in these environmental markets, requires is that new investment. So if unfortunately you've already one of these kind of early movers who've already invested a lot in the natural capital, that wouldn't be eligible for the green loan unless it was an upgrade or further investment into the same project. So the agri-green loan is sort of a going forward thing. If you've got existing debt and in the past it has supported investment, I'm sorry, that wouldn't be applicable. And the other thing I should say is that because the agri-green loan doesn't really make any money, it does require, it's only available to CBA caps.
Hi, Carmel. Thanks so much for that. I just wanted to ask, so obviously applying for credit under something like this, you would want to see a business plan or how the loan would get paid back. I'm just interested to know, there's quite a lot of, new capital, natural capital markets emerging, and I'm just wondering what the appetite is for those types of things, hence if they're not proven necessarily. So biodiversity certificates, reef credits that we have, unless you have an investor kind of lined up ready, there could be a bit of risk in terms of selling those as assets. I was just wondering what your take is on that.
Yeah, so certainly on carbon, we wouldn't see any risk that you're able to sell them once you've got them. The risk is that they don't turn up. So you forecast you're going to produce 100 ACCUs, and then for some reason the carbon isn't sequestered. Probably less likely in environmental plantings unless there's, a real dry soil carbon tends to be the bigger risk there. So our focus is more just on understanding that the ACCUs will actually be produced. We don't see any risk in being able to sell them. We probably just haven't seen too many examples of reef credits and biodiversity credits yet because it's so new, particularly people borrowing who are in those schemes. But we're very, very supportive. So we realise that this is an enormous opportunity for farmers and the participation rates are going to be increasing rapidly. So we're ready. Like, we recognise that that's going to be an important part of income for many farmers now. So absolutely, kind of CBA will look very carefully, as we do at all income sources when you're borrowing debt, but a huge appetite to be receptive to it.
So has there been much uptake of the loan so far?
There's an enormous amount of interest, and not one person has sort of gone, what are you doing? Back off. This is not, where a bank should be playing. Everyone's just very supportive of the bank trying to kind of kick the can and support the investment costs. These decisions don't necessarily get made quickly. So I do recognise that it's a bit different, when the neighbour's property comes up and you've been waiting for it for 7 years, you jump on it and you buy it pretty quickly. Well, these kind of investment decisions maybe take a little bit longer. So we've got a long pipeline. So that's really exciting because the other thing is too, people are still getting their head around this stuff. Well, what kind of investments do I want to make on my farm? Everyone's got a business plan. Not everyone has yet got a sustainability plan. So as we're seeing people start to understand it more, talk about it more, open their minds to the challenge a bit more, we're definitely getting a lot of interest. And hence why I'm really excited to be here, because it's by being in forums like this that we can really try to, offer the product to people who are trying to, do amazing things like you all are.
I'm just wondering how much has come out of the pipeline, having been involved with purchasing nature conservation properties and restoring them as Tanya has been and others. I'm just interested in, there's a lot of interest. Has much come out of the pipeline yet? Because it sounds really exciting.
Come out as in funded? Is that what you mean?
As in business written, yes, business written.
We're trying to publish examples of agri-green loans that we've written to try and kind of illustrate how they're being used. Points. So had one client down in Victoria, glass houses. They've used a kind of thing around the energy efficiency of their glass houses and really trying to solve for the high energy costs that they have. And then in Queensland, we had a client who purchased land and used the Agri Green Loan to undertake a soil restoration program. So we've got clients doing carbon farming projects. We've got clients converting to rotational grazing for regenerative benefits with livestock. It's slow, but it's building. We only launched formally in September, I think it was, or August. So it's all pretty new.
Thanks for that.
Carl, just one final question about, so the carbon market, although it has issues, but the ACCUs and the methodologies are pretty set. Biodiversity market still under development. Do you have a sense of how quickly things are progressing to a point where there'll be clarity around methods and what have you? Is that 6, 12, 2 years away? Does the Commonwealth have a read on that at all?
Just sort of our engagement with government, they're just so keen to get behind the regenerative work that is and needs to happen, and of course across the entire states. But at the moment, the biodiversity stuff is seeming to be very state driven, and I think the last government was really trying to sort of push it at a federal level, and I think that's what we need. And then also thinking about managing nature and climate together rather under separate schemes. So I think it's still got a ways to go in terms of the time frame. I just think quickly because it was interesting to hear Tanya talking about the revised method that she was able to get for the koala work, and I've heard lots of examples of the RF working towards new methods. I just think there's a huge appetite to deliver what the sector needs to get the job done. So yeah, I don't have a firm time frame, but I think everything's moving very quickly.
Yeah. And could I ask a supplemental question, a really sort of focused one? The business model for CBA is not so much pinned to any of the credits or carbon credits or anything. It's the restorable value of the productive asset that you're banking on, essentially. Is that right?
That's exactly right. I mean, at the end of the day, we bank risk. And so increasingly, we now understand that environmental risk in particular, either coming from climate or because natural capital's a bit run down and needs some restoration or investment. For us, that's a good outcome. And we're right behind it because that's no different to managing your price risk or any other sort of style of production risk. We now know that environmental risk is just as important. So improving our quality 100% is in our vested interest. And also, as a community sort of minded, responsible organisation playing a leading role in the economy, we're doing what we can to sort of help more holistically around net carbon zero and nature positive.
Terrific. All right. Thanks, Carl.
Thank you.
Brett.
Yep.
Over to you, mate.
My name Brett Smith, as I mentioned before, so thanks, Wardy, for the invite along. I suppose my background, the main reason for being here was Wardy asked me to come along to speak about the supply chain around wool, and particularly in the carbon space, and wool, essentially being clean, green, renewable fibre it is. But before that, I'll get into some of my background sort of in this area, because I've wear a few different hats across the industry. I've worked for all the schools online, based out of Tamworth, but my mum and dad are still on the farm between St George and Mandara, which is where I come from today. And we're running about 5,000 merinos there still, so wool's still our main business there. And then I suppose the background there is we've always been a non-wheels flock, so we sort of had an opportunity to start entering the non-wheels markets when all that flared up, nearly 20 years ago now. But on top of that too, I've always had a great interest in holistic management and improving grazing management. And I did holistic management training with the fellow named Ryan Marshall, who Wardy knows well. About 10 years ago, when I first moved to Walgett, when I was first posted there, working for another wool broker. And I suppose that sort of renewed, excited my interest in the, combining the non-wheels wool story with the holistic management, sort of regenerative as the term is now, and selling that up the chain, because obviously wool's got a really neat fit into that area. And then as the carbon debate or carbon markets developed, That's probably the, in my opinion, the next step on for, for wool and then not, and particularly the non-mules wool as the next sort of step forward. So I suppose on the marketing point of view, obviously anyone familiar with wool would be responsible wool standards is probably the main highest level wool accreditation scheme for non-mules wool, particularly into Europe. We essentially need it to go into Europe, from what I understand. So that's probably the basis of it, and that's a lot to do with animal welfare and non-mules being the first part. And then other animal welfare, it's quite extensive, independent auditing comes with it. And there is a pretty big land management component with it, which is probably at this stage fairly entry level, but I'll probably see that increasing over time. So that's probably going to become a big part of it. And I think